There's something interesting that happens when you socialize together in a fitness space.
Welcome to Real Health with me, Karl Henry. Folks, 10% of people in Ireland are members of a gym. This membership takes a variety of forms, but it's undeniable that gyms are important for many people in the country. Today, we look at the history of the gym in Ireland, and to help me is lecturer in the Sociology of Sport at Ulster University, Dr Conor Heffernan. Conor, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. So yeah, Carl, thank you so much for was a long time listener, first time talker. This is very fun and exciting, and it's good. I've just been lecturing for 3 hours, so hopefully this will be a willing and receptive audience.
Well, it'll be a fascinated audience, I think. I think it's a really interesting topic. How does one become a lecturer in the sociology of sport? How does that happen?
I would say by being a terrible historian. So the backstory is I did a history undergrad and I was terrible at it. So I was in Dublin and medieval Irish history and Civil War and War of Independence, World War II, etc. And I wasn't very good. So eventually one of the lecturers was quite exasperated and said to a 19-year-old, what do you like? I was like, well, I like going to the gym. And he kind of threw his hands up in the air and said, just do that. So I did an essay on the history of fitness. Charles Atlas, that was the first essay I ever did on dynamic tension, putting the hands together, etc. And then from there, I did a master's over in England on Indian club swinging, which is a form of club swinging training that kind of died out, but was once like the fitness fad of the day. PhD then back in Dublin on physical culture in Ireland, so the birth of the gym movement in Ireland. Taught in Texas then for several years in the kinesiology program at UT Austin, and now I'm back at Ulster University as a sociologist of sport. So I would say I got lucky because no one stopped me at any point. I think if I had been stopped, I probably would be an accountant at this point. But the barriers were never there for me to question the viability of this as a career and as an interest. So thank God for sheer dumb luck.
Oh, it's fascinating. And as someone who grew up my mum had a cheese business and my dad had a gym. So like when I was like 5, I was either in the gym or in a van delivering products to all the gyms in Dublin at the time, like the old school gyms like Atlas and the Ulysses and all the ones around kind of this neck of the woods in town that no one would have ever heard of. So I kind of grew up around that environment and like unique physique and all the really big body, like there were big bodybuilding gyms. So like it's a fascinating topic. This is going to be like two geeks going head to head about, well, that story. But it's fascinating. So let's get stuck into where the gym culture began then in Europe. So take us there first. We'll start there.
Yeah, so I do want to say I had a good pun about your family made cheddar, but we don't need to go down that road. So yeah, the birth of the gym movement in Ireland it's an older phenomenon than we think about. I think people usually think about say 1970s, 1980s, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jane Fonda, etc. Even they might think of like 2000 onwards with like the CrossFit phenomenon and birth of triathlons, not this sort of new wave of fitness. But it actually dates really to like the late 1700s and early 1800s. And bizarrely, the sort of modern gym movement has a lot of its origins in the Napoleonic era and Napoleon's wars across Europe. I've yet to watch the Joaquin Phoenix film. I suspect gymnastics don't play a role in it, but I could be pleasantly surprised that they were true to fiction and said, well, we'll focus on the workouts. But effectively, there's two things that are important about the early 1800s. One is Napoleon wins a lot, and two is this annoys a lot of people. So Napoleon wins a lot. His troops are known for being very fast, very agile, very mobile. They're able to move around the field very quickly. So when Napoleon is successful and other armies are defeated, they start to think, right, well, what do we have to do? Because this isn't just a strategy thing, it's also a physical fitness thing. So we start to see militaries beginning to incorporate some form of gymnastics. The British military hires its own personal instructor, or physical instructor, pardon me, PHTS in the early 1820s, largely because of the Napoleonic era. You also have a very angry German. Well, Prussian to be specific, but when a sentence starts with very angry German, something serious is about to happen in world history. So this individual is called Ludwig Jahn. He was a Prussian who, in the wake of Prussia's defeat to Napoleon in the early 1800s, said, listen, we lost, Prussian men lost because we're weak, we're not strong enough, and we need to be more physically vibrant. So he created his own gymnastic system called the Turnverein system. It was an outdoor gymnastic space that sort of pommel horses, gymnastic rings, bodyweight exercises. And Jan and others are part of this first great wave of gymnastics, which spreads across Europe. So the history of the gym in Ireland, the first private and public gym to open in Ireland, and it's the same It's the same man and woman for both. Opens in 1825. Monsieur Bugeaud, who's a Frenchman who comes to Ireland by way of Spain and Liverpool, is hired by the Royal Hibernian Military School, which was in the Phoenix Park. It's now a nursing home in Dublin. He was hired to teach gymnastics to the boys and girls of children, or sorry, boys and girls whose fathers had gone to fight in the British military. And he also opens up a gym in Dawson Street, again in Dublin. You can tell with my Dublin accent that I have a particular pride that Dublin is the birth of Irish fitness, not Cork, Dublin. Just put that one across. So the history of the gym sort of culture in Ireland is 1825 when Bugeaud was hired by the Royal Hibernian Military School because he opened up his gym in Dawson Street. The history of the gym movement in Europe in general is sort of that late 1700s, early 1800s. And like it's a very transformational thing. One of the men who inspired Jan was another German man called Gutsmuth. And he opens his book on the need for gymnastics with a line that I've been meaning to get etched somewhere, but I don't know if it'll make me seem like a sociopath. But it's we are weak because it does not occur to us to be strong. And it was this sense of like, road to Damascus, eyes opening. We can do this. This can be a bodily culture, for every man, woman, and child. So it is this huge wave of excitement in certain quarters, in schools, among the general public, also among the medical profession as well, in the 1820s and 1830s in particular, around the societal value and impact of gyms, purposeful exercise and gym cultures.
One of the things you wrote in the article that I read, I think it was on the RT website, was that the gym becoming a vital third place. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, it's a really interesting concept by an American sociologist, Ray Oldenburg, and it's this idea of a location where people regularly meet and socialize. Now, when Oldenburg coined it in the late 1980s, it was looking specifically at the United States, but typically we can see it as a place that is not the home, it is not the workplace. It could be a church, it could be a cafe, it could be a bar, bookstore, library, public park, but it could also be a gym. And I think this is an important thing to consider because people often, and we'll go back to some of the old gyms that you mentioned. I think people often underestimate how important the gym is as a place of socialization because you bring people together from different, socioeconomic classes, different locations, different regions, different nationalities, different genders, and you're bringing them all together in one place in a way that usually doesn't happen anywhere else. So the part of my story that I didn't mention is that I trained in Hercules during my undergraduate days.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God. Really?
Yeah, going old school.
On Talbot Street?
On Lurgan Street, that's right.
Yeah.
So it was in Hercs, where I was training with older lifters from who were in the 60s and 70s. Some of them had competed against Olympic weightlifters like Gerd Bonk, who was a great German weightlifter. One of them had competed against. But here was I, a 19-year-old, training and working out with people that I would never have met, in any other walk of life. So I think the third place element is really important because there's something around fitness that can bond people together. There's another academic, Henry McNeil, who wrote a book, Walking Together in Time, and he talked about muscular bonding was the term he used. So when people are training together, something seems to happen in terms of their ability to socialize. Like if anyone has ever been in a CrossFit box or a park run or, in a running group, a walking group, whatever the case may be, what are the odious terms here? Like bums and tums class, dads and lads type of thing. Like, I think they'll appreciate that there's something interesting that happens when you socialize together in a fitness space. So that's why I think the third place is an important concept because the gym emerges tentatively as a third place in Ireland in the 1820s. Probably doesn't become a proper defined third place until maybe the 1930s, 1940s, when it becomes a solidified commonplace. But I think, nowadays in 2024, few people would dispute both the physical and mental benefits they get from going to the gym and working out with others, training with others, and socializing with others.
And what drives gym culture then? So what are the driving forces behind it? And the growth of gym culture?
On a personal level, I'd tell people the desire to look better naked.
That goes back to Eugene Sandow. If you take back to the pictures of Sandow, he was one of the first, along with Charles Atlas later, where he had a body and a physique, and it was about looking good, that kind of Greek kind of sculptured god kind of concept.
Yeah, and I'm happy you mentioned Sandow. One of the strangest but happiest things I did was during the last Bloomsday, I gave a talk on Sandow because he appeared in Ulysses, or in James Joyce's book Ulysses. And it was just funny because my wife studied English. in university. And she was like, between the two of us, I never thought you would be the one getting an invite to Bloomsday talking about, the first bodybuilder. Now, more sort of substantively, what drives the gym culture, there's sort of three main drivers from like an institutional level. And institutions are more important than individuals when it comes to popularizing fitness. So I already mentioned militaries. So Ireland in particular benefits. What an odd sentence for a Dubliner to be saying who's based in Belfast. Ireland really benefits from the British military when it comes to fitness. In 1860, the British military creates its own branded fitness regime. It's created by a Scotsman named Archibald MacLaren. They create the Royal Army Physical Training Corps. So basically, they have their own, gym trained or army trained gym instructors. They open up a gym in Aldershot in England, but then the next gym they open is in the Curragh in County Kildare. Okay. So the second ever British military gym is in the Curragh in County Kildare. It's built in the mid-1860s. And that's important because the men who are trained at the Curragh will then in subsequent years go out and be the instructors in schools, in private gyms, public gyms, sports clubs, etc. So the military is a really important driving force. Schools are a really important force as well. Dr. Conor Heffernan has written a book, The History of Physical Education in Ireland, which details the evolution of that as a taught and non-taught subject on the island of Ireland over the last 100 years. But again, late 1800s, we start to see physical education be a core part of the curriculum. And then we have, I suppose, sort of individual entrepreneurs sprinkled in with the medical profession. And over a 200-year period, the medical profession has sort of waxed and waned in terms of its enthusiasm for physical fitness. 1820s to 1850s, you see a lot of doctors embracing physical fitness. 1860s to 1890s in Europe and the United States, you see a lot of skepticism around it, and especially for weight-based activities, so lifting weights, training heavy, etc. You get terms or ideas like, training with weights will damage your heart, you'll be muscle-bound, you'll be inflexible, things like that. But then from the sort of 1940s, 1950s onwards, you see the emergence of exercise science, sports science, and then doctors beginning to take more interest in heart health. Dr. Kenneth Cooper starts an aerobics revolution in America in the 1960s because he's interested in cardiovascular disease and cardiovascular health. So I think if you were to say the main drivers, outside of wanting to look better naked, because,
which is okay too.
It's okay. Yeah, listen, it's absolutely okay. Physicians, medical profession, the military, schools as well. And then we have those like individual entrepreneurs, your Bujots, your Eugene Sandows, your Arnold Schwarzeneggers, your Pat Henrys, etc., who are starting their own gyms and in making it more accessible, increasing the accessibility into fitness spaces.
And then, of course, as we go on through, 1940, 1950, 1960, we get into the 70s, and that's when we see a huge explosion. And Jane Fonda is very much responsible for a lot of that. And Schwarzenegger and pumping iron. There was a decade of of pop culture, for want of a better word, with the likes of Jane Fonda and the systems and the structures they put in place and that, comes over this part of the world maybe a year or two later, but that drives the boom in Ireland then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I was mentioning to your producer off air that there's sort of three booms, in the Irish fitness space. There's 1820s to 1840s, there's the 1890s to really the 1930s, and then there's 1970s, I'd say to the present day. And what really drives the current boom, that we're all situated in, thankfully, is pop culture really defining and accepting physical attributes in terms of the leading stars. So there's a great book by John Fair and David Chapman called Muscles in the Movies, which talks about, in the 1970s, male action leads. You have Rocky Balboa, comes out in 1976. Rocky has training montages, and that's quite a rare thing, right? That you don't actually see that a lot up until that point. Or if you do, it's, Charlie Chaplin in a gym and he's making fun of the muscular guy, or he's tripping over the dumbbells and the barbells and breaking a window as he kicks them out. So you have Rocky comes out in 76. You have Pumping Iron comes out in 1977, which is this critically important bodybuilding documentary, which you can still get clips of on YouTube. And that's, the birth of Arnold Schwarzenegger as a cultural icon.
Well, you can buy it on Apple TV. I have it on my iPad or my Apple account anyway, and I watch it back probably once or twice a year. It's fascinating. It's every time I watch it, it's equally as fascinating. It's fabulous.
I'm so happy to hear that because I grew up watching training montages from Rocky and Pumping Iron. And now I talk to my students and they're like, oh, no, we look at this influencer. And I'm like, I have no idea.
I have the Rocky box set. I've all like there's 8 of them now, is there? And I watched and when I'm starting into a training period for like a new event or a race or whatever, and I always watch. I go through the Rockies from like 1 to 5, particularly the later ones, not so much. But there's something in them about it. Just between the music and the montages, they just motivate you to train and train harder. And they're fabulous tools of motivation.
And even, Sylvester Stallone, we're going to nerd out now, but it'll be good and it'll make sense, I promise. Sylvester Stallone is interesting because he actually trains like a bodybuilder. So Franco Columbu, who's Arnold Schwarzenegger's training partner and lifetime friend, unfortunately passed away a few years ago, he trains Sylvester Stallone for the later Rambo movies and the later Rocky movies. So if you look at Rocky's physique in Rocky 1 versus 3 or 4, where he does present like a lightweight bodybuilder, that's because he was training as a bodybuilder. And some of the most impactful action movie stars in the 1980s are Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, maybe Rob Van Dam, if we want to throw him in as well.
Yeah.
Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah. Lou Ferrigno comes into with the Incredible Hulk comes into
the Incredible Hulk as well. So we see these muscular stars. And they're not all bodybuilders, Rocky, like he is using bodybuilder methods, but he doesn't come from bodybuilding, or Sylvester Stallone rather, being the action movie stars. And then from a women's space, we have Jane Fonda really helping with the aerobic and keep fit boom. But you also have this tentative acceptance, it's still not really where I would like it to be personally, of women's strength and muscularity. So if anyone, and again, going back to maybe Arnold, in Terminator, Linda Hamilton is doing pull-ups in one of the Terminator movies.
Yep.
And Leslie Hayward, who's written a huge amount on women's bodybuilding, has talked about, Hamilton's biceps in that scene encourage this vast sway of women to begin taking up strength training. And there are other things we could talk about. The jogging boom, which begins in the 1960s, 1970s, that coalesces as well. We also have concerns around obesity and sedentary behavior from like the WHO and individual medical boards and bodies, etc. But like from an impactful point of view, it is really pop culture, which I think drives this, and it transforms the gym industry because you see more diversity in gym spaces. It's not just because in Ireland from 1930s to 1970s, gyms are largely male-dominated weight training spaces. So I mentioned Hercules, it's still around, it's an incredible gym, but from the 30s to 70s, that's bodybuilding, Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting, and Greco-Roman wrestling. Now you could train to keep fit, but even interviewing guys in Hercules, they talk about, you'd start off in another gym to then graduate to being, big and strong enough.
And they were so different to what we see now as gyms now. So like gyms now, with the exception maybe of some of the box gyms, but they're glossy. There's lights, there's strobes, there's music. The likes of those gyms in the 70s into 80s and into 90s to a point, like of Unique kind of Hercules and all of those, they were an Atlas, which was on top of O'Connell Street. You go in and they were like dingy, smelly, sweaty, and there was weights everywhere and rubber hanging off things. And they were the most romantic, in a really weird way, places to be because you were there and the big, powerful men and mostly men, but the women too. But there was a romance to that when you went in, and amazing characters who would run them, who had just a passion for and a graw for the movement and the strength and teaching as much as they could to the people that almost that kind of the community who would come to those gyms and to pass on their information. It was an amazing kind of environment to grow up in, for want of a better word.
Oh, no, absolutely. And like spit and sawdust is the way I usually refer to those gyms. And it's funny. I say I have a home gym. It's not as grandiose as that, but it's literally like bare walls, like really utilitarian. And my wife's like, do you not want to make this fancier? And I'm like, this is my happiest place. Gray walls. I can blast my music. I can grunt. It's very happy. I say this, I'm not a hulking bodybuilder by any means. But so you have those gyms, and you're right to mention that, Karl, but then you have, the emergence from 1970s, 1980s really, of these more glossy, like public-facing gyms. And it's interesting because in America, those like health franchises start in the 1950s, 1960s with Vic Tanny's gyms. It takes a while for them to come into Ireland, but they're really important because before that, you have city council gyms, leisure centres to a certain extent, then the spit and sawdust gyms, and then your only other exposure to gym cultures would really be from PE classes. Sports in Ireland took a long time to appreciate strength and conditioning and gym cultures. They were more aerobic based, like let's run the lads around the field 100 times, etc. I would say that only comes really in the 1990s. So like the fitness boom in Ireland like really transforms the landscape of fitness within the island of Ireland because it goes from being niche but really dedicated to something I will do on my lunch break or something I'll do before work or after I drop the kids off school. It becomes much more accessible for people.
And do you think now we're in a golden age of fitness and gyms? Like you look around and it's almost no, it's normal and it's normalized now, and there's from all levels of income, be it the huge gyms with very low cost and very low service but low cost of entry, which reduces the barriers of entry for people, which is great, to the more unique ones, the more expensive ones, to the box gyms. That we do seem to be in that age where it's the done thing that you go to the gym and you get the water bottle and you have the bag and you have your community. You know, is that a golden age that we're seeing now? And is that a global thing as well as an Irish thing?
So I think it's definitely a global thing. I'll collect my thoughts on whether it's a good thing or a bad thing because I have so many emotions attached to that question. But it's a global thing. There's a number of Swedish scholars, both thankfully for me with the surname Anderson because I cannot remember anything else about their names, who have talked about the sort of globalization of fitness. And there's a really interesting thing which has happened, which is if I travel to Barcelona and get a gym membership for a day, I probably have the same equipment in front of me if I go to Perth in Australia, it's probably the same equipment in front of me. You know, if I go to Dallas in America, if I go somewhere in Venezuela, if I go to Tokyo in Japan, that there's been this sort of like spreading of the same gym culture. McDonaldization is one term that and the two Andersons have used, where you know what you're going to get, and it's all very regulated and standardized. And likewise with the classes, like if you look at the global popularity of say the Les Mills classes, pardon me, which are sort of a worldwide phenomenon, or at least, within certain countries, or like CrossFit, F45, etc. It's been a while since I've been in a physical gym space, spin classes, etc. You sort of know what you're going to get. So I think that's good, and the barriers have definitely lowered. And I think that's a net positive. I think there's never been this depth and intensity of the global interest in fitness in recorded human history. Now, we've had whole societies built around fitness culture, the thing about Sparta and ancient Athens, but we've never had this depth and breadth of fitness cultures. Whether or not it's a good thing, I'll start with the good. And some of this is informed by, I was really lucky, and a massive shout out to a friend and mentor, John Todd. I was a timekeeper at the Arnold UK Strongman and
Oh
Strongwoman
wow, okay.
competition at the weekend just passed. And I had the chance to go to the Fitness Expo, which is attached to this. And it's an incredible space where you see, the huge diversity of what's happening within a fitness space. So I think there's huge benefits to how much easier it is to exercise. Even if someone can't afford a gym membership, they can go on YouTube and get free yoga, walking, calisthenic, classes, immediate access, etc. There's never been more information, podcasts, websites, TikTok, Instagram, etc. And I think that's all a really net positive and wonderful. I think sometimes it can be a negative because we still have very restricted messages around the sort of popular idea of fitness. And one of the things that I love about strongman and strong woman in particular is there's a focus on function as opposed to form. And what I mean by that is there's a diversity of body shapes and sizes in strength sports like powerlifting and strongman, strong woman that I think mainstream fitness cultures still tend to be six-pack abs for men, and I would still say delicate and slender for women. I think there's a lot of good work being done to challenge that, but I think the overall commercialization of fitness, if you look at it as a monolithic sort of capital enterprise, we tend to still focus on like quite rigid body regimes. There's also some of the issues in advertising where it tends to still be predominantly white bodies being promoted. It's still people in their 20s and 30s. Even though practitioners talk about fitness as a lifestyle, the industry itself still focuses on teens and 20s. Supplement industry is open to a lot of question marks about the efficacy and also the predatory nature of the advertising. This is what happens when you ask an academic a question. I can keep going on the negatives, but I really love fitness, and I think this is actually a golden age. But there's still, like anything, like all families, yeah, you love everyone in the family. You mightn't always like them. So, like my relationship with fitness is I love it to death, but there are elements in the industry that I think could maybe have a little bit more room for improvement, because certainly I know the number of people who exercise now is not always reflected in how fitness is portrayed in films and media and in supplement advertisements and in group class pictures, etc. So I think, the tide is changing with that, which is wonderful, but it's still maybe a black mark against sort of the global concept of fitness.
There are pros and cons to everything, my friend. Absolutely. It's been great to catch up.
What a good way to summarize that.
Absolutely. It's been great to catch up. This has been it's been a trip down memory lane. So all those gyms, I remember them, and I remember going into them. I can remember the smell of them, and the guys who used to own them, and just going in as a 6 and a 7 and an 8-year-old delivering like protein shakes and stuff, and just seeing these monsters. And it's brought me back to my childhood, and it's been absolutely wonderful. If people want to find out more about the content and the work that you do, tell us what your website is.
Yeah, perfect. So I have my own website, Physical Culture Study, which I've been running for 10 years. No, I don't think that's the best name for it, Physical Culture Study, but yes, I am going to hang on to it for dear life. And just for non-Conor related stuff, if people are interested in the history of fitness, there's a wonderful online archive called thestrongmanproject.com, created by Rogue Fitness in the Stark Center of the University of Texas, where you can look at old posters, pictures, workouts, letters, articles of strong men and women over the last 100 years. And then also Rogue Fitness have done a series of documentaries on stone lifting in Scotland.
That's actually, before I go, that's become really popular now. Tommy Tiernan interviewed
David.
Yes, he did, David. Yeah. And off the back of that, I actually got the map. I bought the map, or I downloaded the map, and I have it at home of all the lifting stones all around Ireland, and it's now on my list. But like loads of people have been chatting to me about, have you heard about that? It's really become it's part of this golden age, and it's such an old kind of tradition. But actually, because he was on with Tommy and the Instagram work that he does, he's making it very trendy again, which is absolutely. And at some stage we'll have him on as a guest. He's on our list. Anyway, Conor, we could talk all day long, folks. I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode, a reminiscence of the gym culture in Europe and in Ireland, and two absolute gym geeks having a good old chat about the history of the gym culture. And we really hope that you enjoyed it. As ever, you know where we are, at Karl Henry PT on Instagram, Real Health on the Irish Independent website. And we'll see you next week for more Real Health. Slán go fóill.